Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today we're looking at the 1992 story arc, Operation Galactic Storm, from Marvel Comics. It all started with the Kree-Skrull War. While there had been events and crossovers before it, the Kree-Skrull War was the first to really make an event out of it, as it crossed over threads of storylines from Fantastic Four, Avengers, Captain Marvel, Thor, and the Inhumans, as the Earth found itself caught in an epic battle between two alien races vying for control of the galaxy. The fight would come to a literal standstill when the Kree's leader, the Supreme Intelligence, brought out latent superpowers inside professional sidekick Rick Jones that froze every member of both races in place all across the galaxy. But while that story arc ended, it didn't really resolve anything. There was no Hiroshima moment, no diplomacy to settle things between the two alien races. As far as we knew, once the Avengers came home, the two empires simply kept fighting. But devastation would hit the Skrulls when Galactus devoured their homeworld, killing millions and causing the Skrull diaspora to break out into civil war, which killed millions more. But there were other great powers in the universe, and soon another major race, the Shi'ar, would fill the gap left by the fall of the Skrulls. Up to this point, the Shi'ar had primarily been part of X-Men stories, appearing first as only nightmares from Charles Xavier's dreams, but by only a few issues later, we would see that they were actually real and totally not a reference to anything at all. This is actually pretty impressive. This was pre-home video, pre-VCRs. The artist had to watch the show and then just draw this from memory. Or I guess maybe he could have taken a very bad photo of his TV, but either way, it's impressive work. That's not important right now. What is important is that with division rising between the Shi'ar and the Kree, the Avengers are about to find themselves once again in the middle of an intergalactic war between giant alien empires. Is history due to repeat itself? Let's find out and take this away. The comic opens on the planet Hala, homeworld of the Kree Empire. There's a bright flash, and then everybody dies. Everybody except for Captain America, or should I say, Captain Supreme Intelligence Jump Scare! Yeah, that's weird. But it's because this is just a dream. The dream of Rick Jones, who has circled back to being a sidekick for the Hulk, the person he was originally the sidekick for, who is currently working with a group called the Pantheon that didn't have much staying power, but I feel we're supposed to sort of be another Inhumans or Eternals type group, which I guess they kind of are, since those groups never gained much popularity either. Oh, sick burn. Delphi, the Oracle, talks to Rick about his dream and convinces him to meet up with Cap since he seemed to be a part of it. So even though Rick is still put out from that time that Captain America refused to let him be a sidekick, I guess still unaware that it was actually Red Skull at the time impersonating Cap, Rick does meet with the American hero. But the moment they get together, they're attacked by Warstar. That's like a 2-for-1 deal, because Warstar consists of this large guy, Cecil, and this small guy, Beneath. These two, like basically all of the Shi'ar, first appeared in some X-Men comics, the Dark Phoenix saga in fact, and also was one of my favorite toys that I had as a kid, because I could launch Beneath out of Cecil's back like a rocket. Pow! Cap keeps both parts of Warstar busy and throws Rick his Avengers card, so that Rick can escape on Cap's Sky Cycle. It's a motorcycle for the sky. Yeah. Rick does escape, but that just delivers him right into the arms of a waiting Shi'ar ship. And man, I'm sorry, but we gotta talk word bubble placement for just a second. This is the first bubble that you're supposed to read, and then this is the second, this is the third, and then this finally is the fourth. But seriously, who wouldn't start with the fourth? It's the highest one up. But it also makes no sense without the previous conversation happening before it. I know comic creators hate covering up character art, but man, you gotta move that title somewhere else so you can place these speech bubbles better. This shit gets confusing. The lady in pink is named Oracle. We gotta get her together with Delphi. And she reads Rick's mind to discover the location of a hidden Kree base. The same base where Captain Marvel fought Jan Rog over the Psyche Magnetron. A battle that took place right after Rick Jones began riding backseat to Marvel's Avengers, and which resulted in the explosion of the Psyche Magnetron, an event that gave Carol Danvers, aka Miss Marvel, her powers. The Shi'ar warriors want some device from inside the Psyche Magnetron, but collecting it sets off the base's security system. And since this is a sequel to the Kree-Skrull War, that means we're getting a Kree Sentry. This Sentry is number 372, almost a full 100 numbers lower than the one we saw in the Kree-Skrull War, meaning he's an even older model. And I love how he just answers the Shi'ar warrior's question. You know, the one that anyone reading this would probably be asking, even though putting it into the dialogue is super stilted and awkward. The 90s was such a funny time for dialogue. Things get even more complicated as the West Coast Avengers arrive. After dealing with Warstar, Cap had called up the Wackos, that's what they call the West Coasties, from a payphone. You know, because cell phones didn't exist yet, so they had these things, you put quarters in them, forget it. And together, they had tracked down the Avengers ID card to find Rick. The Avengers end up fighting the Sentry Bot and a revived Warstar, while the Shi'ar get away. When the Sentry realizes it's going to lose, it self-destructs itself in the cave, leaving the Avengers back at square one. But they do have one ace up their sleeves in the form of the Cosmic Avenger, Quasar. Wendell Vaughn first appeared in an issue of Captain America as Marvel Boy, having inherited energy wristbands from the Golden Age hero of the same name. I guess feeling emasculated, he would start calling himself Marvel Man, but when he was rightly made fun of for that name, he would again change it, this time to Quasar, because it sounds spacier, I assume. The cosmic entity Eon, who we'd met a long time ago in some Captain Marvel comics, would inform Wendell that his quantum bands made him protector of the universe, and in that role, he would also become an Avenger. Now in this story, Captain America sends him to chase down the escaping Shi'ar, but the Shi'ar again manage to get away, this time through a wormhole that opens near the sun, causing some massive solar flares when it does. Worried about this solar flare activity, Quasar goes to Starcore, a scientific research space station near the sun that has appeared a few times in various Marvel comics. The scientists confirm that solar flare activity has been increasing lately, remarkably so even. But before anyone can say anything more, Quasar gets called away to a moon of Saturn, to the tomb of Captain Marvel. Marvel, the first Captain Marvel, died in the first ever Marvel graphic novel, The Death of Captain Marvel. Another story I should probably cover sometime. At his gravesite, Quasar joins another spacefaring Avenger, Starfox, brother of Thanos, where they find a couple of Marvel's fellow Kree soldiers attempting to raid his tomb. This is Captain Atlas and Dr. Minerva, who confess that the Kree are now at war with the Shi'ar, and as if to prove their point, they're all immediately attacked by the Shi'ar Imperial Guard. I absolutely love this two-page spread. In fact, there's a lot of great two-page spreads from this series that I'll probably be including in this video. It turns out that most of the Guard isn't actually there, and are actually just an illusion created by one of their members. Quasar and Starfox quickly capture the couple of Shi'ar that actually did attack, but in the confusion, Atlas slipped back into Marvel's tomb, where he managed to grab what he came for, the Nega bands. As you know, if you've watched some of my other videos featuring Captain Marvel, the Nega bands are what allowed him to Shazam his way between being Rick Jones and being Captain Marvel, immediately switching place between their current position in the negative zone. In an attempt to escape from Quasar, Atlas clangs the bands together, probably expecting to be teleported into the negative zone. But instead, the bands still apparently hold their link with Rick Jones, and the two men instantly swap places. Rick Jones had been with Wonder Man, who had been assigned to keep an eye on him, so Wonder Man finds himself suddenly in a fistfight with the Kree soldier. In arguably the best sequence in the entire story arc, Atlas keeps clicking the Nega bands together to switch places with Rick, forcing Wonder Man to pull his punches, leaving him vulnerable to attack when Atlas inevitably switches back, and keeping the heroes on both sides of the events confused and off balance. But after a few pages of this, Wonder Man gets the timing down and shaka-booms Atlas into unconsciousness. Wonder Man's so proud of himself, he leaves his speech bubble empty. I don't know, man. Maybe that's just a misprint with my version? It looks like in the individual issue, he references the rabbit season, duck season bit, so maybe it was removed due to copyright issues since WB owns Looney Tunes and is doing absolutely nothing with the IP. With that taken care of, the Avengers head back to Starcore, which has been destroyed due to the increased solar flare activity. Luckily, all the scientists got into an escape pod, but as the Avengers arrive to rescue them, they also find an entire Shi'ar armada appearing in space near them. Feeling the need to keep their presence a secret, the Shi'ar attack, and somehow the Avengers are able to defeat the flagship by themselves, and under threat of death from Cersei, the Shi'ar surrender. Cap isn't happy when he hears about the death threats, but there's more important matters to attend to. With both the Kree and Shi'ar using a wormhole near Earth's sun to transport across galaxies, the sun is becoming unstable, and will explode if they don't stop using the wormhole. So with the fate of the Earth once again on the line, the Avengers split up into 3 teams. One to go to the Kree Empire, one to go to the Shi'ar, and one to stay behind to guard the collection of alien prisoners they've taken since the start of the story. It's gotten to be quite a few. Hawkeye is initially assigned to the Earth team, but feeling disrespected, and because, again, this is a sequel to the Kree-Skrull War, he goes and gets some of Hank Pym's Goliath serum to become Goliath again. Can you tell that this is a sequel? Can you tell yet? For some reason, this convinces Cap to let Hawkeye have his way, and so Hawk swaps with US Agent, leaving the Earth team as Agent, She-Hulk, Falcon, Mockingbird, Spider-Woman, Hank Pym, Wasp, and Gilgamesh. The Earthbound team fails their job almost immediately, when they're attacked by a Shi'ar calling herself Nightside, who quickly defeats the unprepared Avengers. During the commotion, Minerva and Atlas also break free, running off and stealing a Shi'ar spaceship to escape. Only this was a trap, as this wasn't Minerva at all, but instead the Shi'ar Hobgoblin, who can change his appearance, and in fact we saw him earlier in disguise as a different Shi'ar, the one who talked the Shi'ar Armada into attacking the Avengers out by the destroyed Starcore. With Atlas trapped by the Shi'ar, they're able to claim Mar-Vell's Nega bands, and Oracle psychically steals plans for the Omniwave projector from his mind. And together with the piece of the Psyche Magnetron that they got earlier, they're finally ready to unleash their plan. And to find out what that plan is, we'll need to follow the heroes headed into space. Our first team, consisting of Thor, Wonder Man, Vision, Scarlet Witch, the current Captain Marvel, Star Fox, and Living Lightning, arrive in the Shi'ar galaxy and immediately come under attack, which leads to an epic Dragon Ball Z style fight between Thor and Gladiator. Sadly, this isn't classic Thor though, but instead the Thunderstrike version, Eric Masterson, who was an attempt to update Thor for modern audiences, allowing him to make MC Hammer references instead of his High Asgardian speech. While he may be a knockoff, he still has the might of Thor and is able to swack Gladiator into submission, repeatedly. That's, an interesting onomatopoeia choice, though. The Avenger then sends the Shi'ar champion back through the wormhole to Earth and uses his power to seal the wormhole behind him so he can't just come right back, though this does mean also cutting off their escape. The team then is immediately captured by the Shi'ar. After some not-so-great diplomacy and some demanding, they manage to get an audience with Empress Lilandra, who reveals what the Shi'ar have been constructing. A giant cargo ship-looking thing. The Shi'ar are calling this a Nega portal, and Lilandra wants the Starjammers, more X-Men side characters who have typically appeared working with the Shi'ar in the past, to haul the device into Kree space. But Wonder Man, freaking out about what the potential destructiveness of such a device could be, grabs Vision and hauls them both into space after the Nega portal. Breaking in brings them face to face with the Starjammers, and after a brief fight, Wonder Man reveals that the Nega portal is actually a Nega bomb! a massive warhead that utilizes the power of the negative zone to unleash undreamt of destructive force. Not wanting to be complicit in such massive planned genocide, the Starjammers decide not to deliver the bomb after all. But it's too late for them to shift course away from the Stargate to Kree space, so they detach from the bomb and leave it floating on the edge of Shi'ar space. The rest of the Avengers team would stay with Lilandra, attempting to convince her to cease her war with the Kree, or at the very least, to stop using the Earth-based Stargates threatening the sun. But they're not very convincing, especially with Thor being a terrible envoy. A diplomat, that man is not. None of that matters much, though, once the Kree send some warriors to assassinate Lilandra. These assassins are Starforce, a team put together by the Kree Supreme Intelligence, that sick-ass face thing we saw from the Kree Skrull War, who has already been shown multiple times throughout the story working behind the scenes. That included putting together a host body that he called Supremor, and bringing together the members of his Kree Avengers equivalent, this group called Starforce. Starforce consists of new characters Shatterax and Korath the Pursuer, a guy named Ultimus who had actually first appeared as an enemy to Thor called Demon Druid at the time, Supremor himself, as well as Captain Atlas, who had been freed from his captivity by Shatterax, and Dr. Minerva, who much later they'll explain that the Avengers just kinda decided to let her go. But at the moment she's first shown on the team, it's a bit of a mystery how she got there. When last we'd seen her, she'd still been captive on Earth. Just as in the Kree Skrull War, though, the Burrito Supreme here is not currently leading the Kree like he normally would. Instead, he has been deposed by these two, Aldan and Dar-Benn. But once again for Supremo, that's only a temporary setback. When our Avengers Kree team, consisting of Captain America, Goliath, Iron Man, Crystal, Hercules, the Black Knight, and Sersi, arrive in Kree space, like the Shi'ar team, they were immediately taken prisoner. But using Sersi's magic to disguise themselves as some of Ronan's accusers, they escape and go on the run, with Iron Man and Goliath splitting off on their own mission while the rest of the team attempt to make their way to the Imperial Palace to speak with Aldan and Dar-Benn. But the Intelligence Supreme sends Starforce to interfere with their progress, kicking up enough commotion to bring out the elusive dual leaders of the Kree. And that is when Deathbird shows up. Deathbird is the sister of Empress Lilandra and had been ruling the Shi'ar Empire at one time herself until being deposed. Now, though she's unaware of it, she is being influenced by the Supreme Intelligence to attack Aldan and Dar-Benn as a means of convincing the Kree to end their attack on the Shi'ar. She traps the Avengers and Starforce in a force field, and the two teams are forced to watch as she succeeds in murdering the Kree leaders. The moment she does, the Supreme Intelligence reveals himself, reclaiming his place as ruler of the Empire. He then sends Starforce to retaliate, and in their rage, they willingly accept the mission to assassinate Lilandra, which is where we left off, with Starforce arriving in the Shi'ar Empire to do exactly that. But the Shi'ar team of Avengers are able to hold Starforce off long enough for Lilandra to save herself. Inspired by the actions of the Avengers, though, she decides to call off the Nega bomb. But her change of heart is too late, as the Skrull are now involved in the war. Or maybe have been all along. Not only does it turn out that a Skrull ship has taken the Nega bomb, but as the tensions heat up between the Shi'ar and Avengers, exploding into a battle, a blast from living lightning inadvertently exposes Lilandra's main advisor as a Skrull agent that had been prompting her into further war with the Kree this entire time. To make matters worse, the Skrulls use the Shi'ar Stargate near the Earth's sun to travel to the Kree Empire, further destabilizing the sun to the point that it risks the death of the star. Fortunately, Carol Danvers arrives right then. Carol had by this point lost her Miss Marvel powers to the X-Man Rogue, but had gained new powers from a white hole that turned her into binary. With these new cosmic powers, she had gone off into space, joining the Starjammers and working with the Shi'ar Empire. She had been following the Nega bomb in an effort to retrieve it for Lilandra, but now learning from Quasar that the sun might explode, she diverts her attention to saving her old home galaxy. galaxy. So she follows Quasar into the heart of the sun, and she uses her power to stabilize the star, undoing the damage that had been done by the nearby stargates, but she does nearly die in the process. Quasar rescues her from the sun and takes her to the Avengers mansion to recover, leaving no one to finish her mission and prevent the Nega bomb from reaching Kree space. Nobody but Wonder Man and Vision, who are still on board the bomb. But Vision, no longer having the emotions provided to him by Wonder Man's thought patterns after what happened in Vision Quest, like I covered last time, like and subscribe, he decides with cold, efficient logic that the best way to end the threat to the Earth is to let the Skrull explode the weapon and destroy the Kree galaxy. So Wonder Man and Vision, who already have a high level of tension between them since Vision Quest, fight each other over whether or not to actually stop the bomb. That fight spills over to the core of the bomb, where we see it really is powered by the negative zone, and this causes the Skrulls to finally notice their presence, so they send troops down to contain the two Avengers. Only, that fight then seems to trigger the bomb, and there, deep in the heart of the Kree Empire, the Nega bomb explodes. A beautifully illustrated shockwave of death spreads across the Kree galaxy, devastating first the Kree homeworld of Hala, then eventually spreading out from world to world, leaving most of the Empire utterly annihilated. Quasar had attempted to follow the bomb after dropping off Binary, but finds he arrived too late. The Kree team of Avengers, save for Captain America, who had been trapped on Hala and left behind, had boarded a spaceship themselves and attempted to reach the bomb in order to stop it. Quasar finds them all floating lifelessly in space. He gathers their bodies and continues searching, running across the Shi'ar team who had made their way here in a second spaceship. Together, they find Wonder Man and Vision, who are miraculously still alive. It seems being at the direct center of the explosion was like being in the eye of the storm. All the energy had been focused outward, causing very little damage to them within, even while it destroyed everything without. Starfox, while making the creepiest face ever, then realizes the Kree team is also actually alive, and is able to revive them, as Cersei used an old trick of the Eternals to turn their bodies into inert matter, a state simulating death, in a desperate effort to save her team, and since Starfox is able to recognize that, he's able to turn them back into living people. Down on Hala, we see that Deathbird, Captain America, and the Supreme Intelligence all also survive somehow, though pretty much the rest of the planet around them is just dead and in ruins. And at this point, the Intelligence explains that everything that has happened was all part of his plan. Everything. If you remember from the Kree-Skrull War, Supremo had stated at the time that the Kree were at an evolutionary dead end, unlike humans who had an enormous capacity to continue evolving. Well, SI found a way around that dead end, but it involved killing billions upon billions of his own people, 98% of the Kree's total population, he says, with a bomb that would mutate the survivors' DNA. And so those that survived would be the strongest of the Kree, and together they would be able to kickstart new evolutionary possibilities for their race. In order to see this through, Supreme had deliberately implanted the plans for the Nega bomb into the minds of the Shi'ar, who merely needed to gather the parts for it together, and would do so once long-held distrust between the Kree and Shi'ar had been pushed to the point that war erupted between the two empires. The Avengers arrive on the planet to look for Cap, finding instead Atlas and Minerva, who had also somehow survived the bomb. Atlas blames the Avengers for what happened to the Kree, understandably very angry, and even after Deathbird and Captain America show up and explain the truth, he refuses to believe it. Only Minerva then confirms it for him, having been in on the plan the entire time. Unable to live with this reality, Atlas activates his suit's self-destruct, and begs the Avengers to do what he cannot and kill the Supreme Intelligence before his self-destruct vaporizes him and Minerva. Cap considers their efforts done, but the Avengers become split over those who want to fulfill Atlas's his last wishes and those who can't stomach the thought of killing in cold blood, even if, as the Black Knight points out, avenging is literally in their name. Those who want the intelligence dead to prevent another such tragedy from ever happening again split off to go fulfill the deed. The intelligence attempts to stop them with imitations of those in their minds they think might be able to defeat them, but these are just ghosts like the Golden Age heroes Rick Jones created during the Kree-Skrull War. The Avengers quickly fight their way through these fakes, smash their way into the Supreme Intelligence's tank, and the Black Knight drives his blade through the Intelligence's brain. The Avengers regroup just as Lilandra arrives to claim the ruins of the Kree Empire in the name of the Shi'ar. Her first act as ruler of this new galaxy is to appoint Deathbird as Viceroy in charge of the Kree galaxy, with Starforce serving directly under her. The Avengers finally leave, but not before Cap gives a quick speech about the destructive nature of absolute authority and self-righteousness, warning of the danger that brings with it, and pointing out that Lilandra now has the unique chance to embrace life instead of destroy it. Words that are also quite obviously pointed at his fellow Avengers. Before we return to Earth, we see that the Avengers were also wrong about the Supreme Intelligence, who didn't die, but instead simply transferred its consciousness into a new computer to continue on despite their efforts. That brings an end to the story arc, though there are a few epilogue issues. In a couple issues of Quasar, the Galactic hero discovers a giant soul-eating monster. Having gorged on billions of Kree souls all at once, it has grown too powerful for Quasar to stop by traditional means, and he instead is forced to go inside of it to talk to the souls of all it's devoured and convince them to stop letting the creature use their power to feast on even more souls. Then there's an issue of Captain America where Cap is haunted by his own ghost of the events of the war. He also decides to give a lecture for his fellow Avengers on superhero ethics, but only Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Scarlet Witch show up. While it's clear that he really only wanted to speak to the Avengers that went off to kill the Supreme Intelligence, so he just says forget it and never ends up giving the speech after all. There's also a couple issues of What If included in the collection that ask what if the Avengers lost Operation Galactic Storm? Which seems like a weird question because I don't really feel like they won Operation Galactic Storm, but okay. In this version of events, when Deathbird shows up to kill Aldain and Dar-Benn, Cap is able to react fast enough to stop her, and Aldan proceeds to murder her while she's stunned. He then exposes the Supreme Intelligence's plotting and kills it with a virus triggered by a special code word. And his murder spree doesn't stop there either. He proceeds to kill Dar-Benn to become sole ruler of the Kree Empire, and then uses the Omniwave technology as the very super weapon the Skrull wanted to use it for in the Kree-Skrull War. He immediately uses it to destroy Earth, and then follows that by destroying the homeworld of the Shi'ar Empire. He then sends all the Avengers to concentration camps except for Cap, who he plans to execute. But Hawkeye, having still gone off with Iron Man alone, manages to swap places with Cap, and Cap goes on to join a Kree resistance movement, free his fellow Avengers, and lead a revolution against Aldan. When they succeed, they're left with attempting to rebuild a universe in ruins, and we're left with getting to the breakdown. Wow, this was a complicated one. Not too surprising from a story spanning 19 parts and 7 different titles. And because it's so long, a lot of it does kind of feel like filler. There's so many issues almost entirely devoted to 1v1 fights. Cap vs. Warstar, Wonder Man vs. Atlas, Iron Man vs. Shatteraxe, Thor vs. Gladiator, Wonder Man vs. Vision. There's also the Captain America issue 400 special that basically pauses all action so Cap can fight the ghost of his past. But despite that, the series is actually still very tightly plotted, with every issue doing something to keep the plot moving forward. So unlike its predecessor, the Kree-Skrull War, the main conflict here never feels far away from the story. And upon rereading, I really came to appreciate these actually well-paced fights, breaking up issues with a lot of bureaucracy and politicking. A lot of which actually does manage to be interesting in its own way, primarily for the continued interaction between members of the Avengers. But the main thing I appreciate about this comic is the perfect representation of the shift that was going on in comic books at the time, We saw Maximum Carnage struggle with some of the same themes, the growing desire from audiences for violence in comics, from both the villains and the heroes. But that story started at 100 and stayed at 100, while this comic starts out pretty lighthearted, silly, and fun. And as the events go on, the realities and dangers of war really start to sink in on the characters, and the mood shift is noticeable and dramatic. I especially appreciate that the comic ends on deliberately refusing to answer the question of which group of Avengers was correct. The ones who sought vengeance for the dead, or the ones who refused to take a life themselves, because that's what being a hero is supposed to mean. It's an exciting reinterpretation of the classic trolley problem, at the same time that it's the exact problem writers working for Marvel and DC were struggling with in trying to keep their superheroes interesting to their modern audiences. Can't help but feel like the Iron Man team won that argument though. So I'm giving this series a recommendation level of high. It's a product of its time period in both good and bad ways, but the epic nature of the story, the consequences of the events, and the chance for so many different characters to get to shine makes this a must-read for Avengers fans, and still well worth the time for superhero comic fans in general. The collected editions get 2 binaries. That's kind of a joke, you see, cause, 2. And we're saying that is a good thing, I guess. I was going to try to give each volume its own rating, but really they're pretty much the exact same thing. Both volumes have 12 issues, with the only special features being the inclusion of the Epilogue issues and the 2 What If issues. Either way, 24 issues across only 2 volumes makes this a pretty nice collection overall, and one well worth picking up. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I knew this was going to be a long one. Wanted to do it right since it was being highly requested. Still should be more big Marvel event stories coming during the rest of the summer, and then hopefully I'll start getting to some of your DC requests. So if you did enjoy this video, or that sounds exciting to you, or you're just interested in joining my side in a cosmic war, then be sure to comment and click the like and subscribe and all that stuff so you can help the channel out. And so you can help yourself to be sure to be here next time, and I hope to see you then, right here in the Comic Cave.